Wow, Zai, that was fast. Yeah, they should be finished up with calculus here in a bit, because that one started at 1 o'clock and should be done by 1:45, 1:50. So, yeah, but also, wow, that was immediate. That was so fast, Zion. But yeah, I'm going to give it till 2, definitely, because of all the kids from Calc. They don't have to watch this, by the way. They feel free to have them, like, just mentally decompress and take a nap or something, because I'm sure that was super fun. How'd the Gov exam go yesterday, Zai? Alright. Oh wait, one more thing. It's an email. Okay, that's fine. You were blessed with easy prompts. Okay. Did your peers get different prompts, or did they all have the same prompt? I would have assumed you've all had the same prompt because it was all done at the same time. And careful on the Gov ones. Like, this is I found that a lot of students believe that the Gov exam is like the easiest when they take it, but the pass rate doesn't indicate. You very over-prepared for? That's good. You'd rather over-prepare than under-prepare. That's always the right methodology. It's always better to do too much than too little. You can't be upset with yourself if you did more than you needed to. Especially when it's something like this year's AP exam where it's only going to hit on like really 2 things. Everyone different ones? Okay. It's good to know. I was wondering if they were going to have a bunch of different versions of the test, which would make sense based on the fact that it's like global. Okay. That's good to know. Realistically, you'd only be compared to people that have the same exact prompts as you. So your peers who are upset about that, you can calm them down a bit with that knowledge, that they're only going to be graded against people who have the same prompt. Like, we have different AP exams each year. There's, like, different versions of the exam. Like, an experimental or an operational version. And the kids aren't graded against people of a different version because you have different questions. So there's a different, like, percent hit rate on that. So you'll be graded against people who also had that easy prompt. And your friends who had hard prompts will be graded against the hard prompts. So that might mean that the degree of difficulty on yours is a little higher in terms of you might have a higher bar to hit to get a higher score. But if it was easy, then that's good. If you get all the points, then that's not a worry. Okay. What's up, Emmy? What's up, Emmy? And we are close. Okay, so we're 5 minutes away. As a heads up for what this video is going to be, College Board, again, they put out a couple of these videos last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. No, it was last week, where they had these 2 practice test videos where they had like this little 45-minute basically mock exam with these 2 questions, and then the next day they did a video where they went over it. This is going to be my video going over those. So if you didn't watch those videos, which is fine, there's a lot of videos on College Board's advanced placement playlist, that kind of a lot. I'm going to be going through these 2 questions. I'm going to give you guys time to, if you want to, respond to them and attempt them before I go over it so that you can get like live feedback. I'll give you time to, so like pull up the question. I'll, fill for time for a few minutes while you guys work on a couple parts of the question, and then I'll go through it. So I'm not just going to like fly through these questions. I want to give you guys time to attempt them at least. Yeah, and then anyone of you watching this after the fact, just feel free to like skip when you're seeing those portions. So I'll give you guys heads up on that. And then the rest of the week will be more review sessions. We're done with content, so at this point we're just reviewing content from previous units. So this week the main goal is to hit stuff from the earliest part of the course. So that'll be units 1, 2, and 3 for us, which the main topics there would be production possibilities, curves, comparative, absolute advantage, regular old supply and demand, which is probably not going to get asked about on the AP exam, GDP, CPI, all that stuff. So like everything prior to the average demand, average supply curve. Basically everything prior to us going on remote learning. That'll be what I'm focusing on this week, and then next week I'll be reviewing the content that we went over in remote learning. And the review will be in like FRQ format, where I'm just going to pull up FRQs and use them to sort of touch on every little bit that you might need to know. So I'll be working through all of that stuff. Again, there's that 86 multiple choice question thing on AP Classroom if you want to work through that. That's not a terrible idea. We'll give you a big look at kind of everything you could get asked about. And then I'm doing the Super Saturday again on this Saturday from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. If you failed that exam. Was that calculus, Runus? Yeah, Calc's tough. Calc's tough in a normal year. Like, I passed Calc BC, but I got pretty lucky. I had a really good teacher for Calc. Yeah, Calc's freaking hard. So, the Calc exam is super hard to tell if you did right, too, because it's a math test. You're like, either I did that great, or I am completely screwed, because I think I forgot how to do, like, half of that, which happens a lot in math. Hopefully the upload stuff works okay. You bought the AC/DC pack, it's really nice. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I saw that thing, the new version of it with like the videos that he's got in there, really good. The practice is really good. At the very end, he has like a cheat sheet. That's really good too. Like it's a worthwhile resource. Like it's super good. I hope you guys had a good time, but I hope you guys were able to do okay on that gov test. Calculus is hit or miss. That's hard. But if you could have done well on it, you don't know. I thought I failed my AP Calculus exam, and then I got a 4 on it. So it's one of those where it's just like that one is completely impossible to gauge performance, really. Oh, I'm trying to think of anybody else or anything else that I want to mention here off the top. Oh, God. Nothing else for econ. I haven't seen anything come down the pipeline for econ. I'm going to be getting graduation information on Friday. On Friday, they're going to be giving us some more information on graduation, so I'll let you guys know about that as soon as I know about it. And then I talked to Dr. Myers yesterday, and there's going to be a meeting for all the volunteers of what we're doing. Yeah, that would work, Renus. Yeah, so what I would do if you're going to do the picture method is to just take the exam on your phone and then use that, take a picture, and submit. Because the taking a picture and sending it to your computer can take time. It's not that it takes that much time, but, you know, it might take a minute to do that as opposed to 15 seconds to do just the phone. And that's 45 seconds you could have to do a little more work on the test. So if you're not worried about time, then, you know, maybe you do that in Runus method, but I would recommend just taking the exam on the phone. Good news is you guys get a lot of tries at this because you have like 6 AP exams, most of you. You dummies. Okay, 2 o'clock. All right, people in the chat, we got like 5, 6 people. That's fine. I figured a lot of them they're not going to watch this one live because of the calculus exam destroying your self-esteem. So good afternoon, everybody. This is a review video. Basically, we are done with new content. Oh, for graduation, families in the cars. Do I know where students are going to be? Yes and no. Preston mentioned last week that he thought he heard that the students are going to be in the stands in some capacity. I am not sure. They may have seats set up. They may have spaced seats set up. I'm not sure yet. I have not heard. I don't think you guys will be in cars. I don't think it's going to be like a drive-in graduation. That seems like that might be a little bit too weird. But there will be social distancing measures in place, so if you are in chairs or in the stands, there would be the 6 feet gap between you. So I think that's why the stands would make sense, because there's enough space there to do that without much of a problem. Sorry. So this is a practice video. I'm going to be going through the AP Macro Practice Test that College Board's been doing. They've been putting these out. They put these out last week. There's 2 practice tests. They're just both long FRQ problems, basically. And I'll be pulling them up, pausing it, giving you some time to attempt at least parts of it, not the whole thing necessarily, but at least portions of it. I'll give you time to just see how much of it you can figure out on your own. And then I'll work through them and explain sort of each component in detail and answer all parts of it and answer any of your guys' questions. So that's the game plan for today. The rest of the week will be more FRQ practice, except for Friday, where I go over our assignments for the week. And then this Saturday, we'll have our AP Super Saturday for macro. It'll be on this channel. It'll be the same way that it always works. It'll just be early. It'll be 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That should be it. And then on AP exam day, also, I'll be doing a live stream pretty much from as soon as I can get it set up early in the morning, probably like 10 a.m., all the way until the AP exam starts. So I'll just be grinding that entire day as well. So I'll take care of all that stuff, and then that'll be it. You guys will be done. Should be great. So let's get to it. Let me pull up the question. First question. And again, these were based off previous year's questions, so we've seen or worked through questions that are very much like these, or pretty close to identical to these, in previous weeks or last semester. So let's go to with everything. So this is based on 2008 test B, because there's more than one test. 2007 AP Macro exam. So it's two questions sort of combined. Yeah, I'm sure it's weird to take the 45-minute test. The cool thing is it feels probably like taking a test in one of your normal classes, because 45 minutes is how long our class periods are. It's weird to take it online at home and for it to be for college credit, but it's just like if I gave you like our FRQ test at the end of the year, it's like, this is your AP exam now. You're just like, okay, weird. All right, so here is our FRQ problem. It is a long one. Now look at how long this thing is. I would tell you to stop at F. So work through parts A through E. And then I'll work through the whole thing. I'll have you stop at F because F and G will probably take some explaining. I believe that outside of some tricky parts in C and D, you should be able to do this. And there's some formulas you might want to remember. And some math you might need to do. Calculator is allowed, so feel free to plug stuff into a calculator, but really for this you shouldn't need to. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. I'll give you guys some time to work through this. I mean, let's put, I have a timer. Let me just put, let's say, that many parts of it. Let's give you 7 minutes. So I'll give you 7 minutes from now, at what says 2:11 on my clock, to work through parts A through E of this problem. If you have questions while working through that problem, feel free to ask it. I will give you small hints, small things, like a formula here or there, something like that. So work through parts A through E. Give it a whirl. Give it an attempt. I'll do it too. Cool. For the purposes of time, I have finished parts A and B. In terms of timing yourself and like how much could you get done, that is with me knowing the formulas off the top of my head. So I was going to be a bit faster on that than you. But if you got through part A and were into part B sufficiently at that point, that's good timing. about halfway there time-wise. So you're only going to part E, is all I'm asking here. Let's see if you can nail this stuff. For part C, remember that the real wages is the actual value of that person's wages. So the nominal wages is just how much they're getting paid, and they're getting paid 20% more. The question is asking, okay, what's happening to the actual spending power of those wages? So you got to think what that's compared to what you're looking at for that. D is the thing that we went over a while ago. It's tricky. Technically for E, F, G, you don't have to have done any of the first part right. E, F, G are their own separate FRQ basically. Okay, 3 minutes left. You should be on to part D at this point. Now, to be clear, time-wise, I'm giving you significantly less time than the AP exam would be giving you. You'd have 25 minutes to complete this problem. So you would have realistically taken probably 15 minutes to have done the first A through E, and I'm giving you less than half than that. So if you don't get through part E, don't freak out. That's normal. I'm just trying to not have this video go for an hour and 45 minutes. And again, if you're watching this after the fact, you can just pause the video, wait until I start answering it. Basically, wait till you start seeing me pull up the whiteboard. And that will be your visual cue of, oh, great, you started to answer it. Your brain is still shook from the exam. I expected that. I expected there to be not a lot of viewers for this one because of that calculus exam. I figured a lot of you would want to take like a mental break, especially from math, and macro is, you know, has some math. This FRQ has some math. Not hard, but still math. So yeah, I was expecting a lot of you guys to not be here today because of the calculus exam. This is all material my brain does not function. Yeah, I know. That's why we're reviewing this kind of stuff this week. Like, this is the kind of stuff that we're reviewing this week because you haven't done it in a while. If you want, as I just hop down to part E. Because part E would be stuff we've done recently. See if your brain can handle part E, and I'll scroll down a little bit. E and F. If you want to. Give you guys about 1 more minute. And again, if you don't have to write this stuff down. If you just want to like have it in your head and be like, I think I know what I did here. I think I knew what to do here. That kind of thing, that's fine. This is more for, can you still figure out how to do this? This is also why having a formula sheet on the AP exam day is a good idea. I need to check my email. Email's all good. Okay, we're at 2:11 on my time, so I'm going to start working through these problems. Let's see how we're doing. For this first part, it says calculate this year's nominal GDP. Nominal GDP is just that year's production in that year's dollars. It's just asking how much in total dollar value did this country produce. Cool. All you got to do for that is price times quantity. 400 times 6 plus 1,000 times 1 plus 800 times 2. So for me, it's this top half is how I would have set this up. And the answer is simply 5,000 because 400 times 6 is 2,400. The second one's 1,000. The third one is 800 times 2, which is 1,600. That's just $5,000. This country produced $5,000 worth of stuff. That's all that was asking. Okay, then assume in Gala land that the GDP deflator, which is the GDP price index, that's not anything crazy, is 100 in the base year. Remember, that's what it should be. Should always be 100 in the base year. And 125 this year. Calculate the inflation rate between the base year and this year's real GDP. Inflation rate, that formula was, let me make this a little bit thicker of a pen. There we go, much better. Year 2 minus year 1 over year 1 times 100. The year 2 and year 1 things you're plugging in there are the GDP deflators. So this would have been 125 minus 100 over 100 times 100. Those would have canceled. 125 minus 100 is 25%. You need the math work through here. It's this second set of stuff. Friendly reminder, this is how the CPI and GDP deflator always worked, was compared to the base year, your deflator or CPI gives you a quick idea of how much inflation was happening. So because your base year GDP deflator or base year CPI is always 100, then your GDP deflator being 125 just means that prices went up by 25% on average. This year's real GDP, there's a way to do that. The formula for real GDP using the deflator was nominal GDP over the deflator times 100. Our nominal was 5,000. That was what we found earlier. Our deflator was 125. And 5,000 over 125 is not the easiest math to do in your head, so don't worry about it. Luckily, you can use a calculator for this, so you would find that this is 40, and 40 times 100 is 4,000. So our answers are 5,000, 25%, and 4,000 so far. Yeah, this is material from a while ago, so a lot of you guys have forgotten how to do this math, I know. That's why I'm glad they used this question, because it's a good prompt for us. Questions over these first three parts. A formula sheet will be very important for you to have. Those of you that forgot how to do this stuff, formula sheet will be very, very, very helpful. There is one on my Moodle. There's actually two. The Unit 3 formula sheet has all of these in it, because all of this stuff was in Unit 3 for us. And then there's that PDF document I have in the AP exam review folder that has a scanned study book that has 20 or so formulas in it too, and a lot of these are in there as well. So have one of those, if not both of those documents, printed or up and ready to go when you're taking the AP exam for this course, because you get a question like this, you're going to need to have them, and you're going to want to have them relatively quickly so that you're not stuck staring at it for too long. C. Since the base year, workers have received a 20% increase in their nominal wages. So people are getting paid 20% more, right? Okay. And wages up by 20%. Can I explain B one more time, please? Yeah, both parts of B, I can do that. So for B, it said, assume that in Galaland, the GDP deflator is 100 in the base year and 125 this year. Calculate the inflation rate. The formula for inflation rate, there was technically like two of them you could have done, was GDP deflator of year 2 minus GDP deflator of year 1 over GDP deflator of year 1 times 100. It's a rate of change formula, ruinous, using your GDP deflators. So I just did 125 minus 100 over 100 times 100, canceled those. 125 minus 100 is 25%. For B2, again, it's nominal over deflator. It's just this formula, so I just plugged in these two things, that 125, in for that formula. Hopefully that helps. Back to part C. So workers are getting paid 20% more. Yeah, it's there. It's on my Moodle. I've got it. It's already there for you. There's the Unit 3 formula sheet, and then there's the PDF that's been scanned up in my AP exam review folder. Also, what's up, Landry? Good to see you. Trying to think. GDP deflator. Oh, sorry. I'm still on C. If workers face the same inflation from Part C, and we said that the inflation rate they faced in Part C was 25%, what's happened to their real wages? Real wages, question mark. So we've got nominal wages went up by 25%, inflation's 25%. What happened to real wages? This is easy, at least logically. People are getting paid 20% more, but everything in the economy is 25% more expensive. How are people doing? Are they doing better than before, worse than before, or the same? Well, they're getting paid 20% more, but everything's 5% more expensive. So no, they're not doing as well, right? Their wages haven't kept up with inflation. It means real wages have gone down. So real wages go down because they are nominal wages didn't keep up with inflation. So people, workers, whoever, have less spending power. So like this bottom half is like my actual answer. Real wages go down because their nominal wages didn't keep up with inflation, so people have less spending power. Austin, hello. Another survivor of the calculus exam has arrived. People have recovered emotionally and physically from the calc exam. It's fine. Whenever we have this live stream on days that you guys have an exam, I do not expect you to be here, period, and then let alone on time. So like I know you guys have I think your lit exam is on Wednesday, tomorrow. So like, hey, that's fine. Don't stress out about needing to be here on time. This video saves. You'll be able to watch it later if you need to. Take time, decompress. You're allowed to not do schoolwork for like 30 minutes after taking a freaking calculus exam. Okay, that would suck. Also, you got lucky. It's a math one. It's a math FRQ. If you didn't have enough math today. So real wages went down here because if they face 25% inflation but they got a 20% pay raise, they're actually getting paid less than before because they're getting paid 20% more, but everything's 25% more expensive. So there's like a 5% gap there of, oh, they're actually 5% poorer. Interesting. That sucks. So yeah, that's real wages go down. If you're looking for explanations over all of this stuff, I explained all of it already, so don't worry about it. Just go with these answers for now. D, if the GDP deflator in Galaland increases unexpectedly, would a borrower with a fixed interest rate loan be better or worse off? Well, first let's translate what the hell this first part means. Right, like GDP deflator increases unexpectedly. GDP deflator increases unexpectedly. Say that this wasn't 125, say that this was 140 or 145 instead. Say it's 140, 145 instead. What would happen? What does that mean? What does it mean if the GDP deflator increases? Well, I used that GDP deflator to find inflation rate, right? Right? Oh, so if GDP deflator goes up, then that would mean that there's more inflation. Right, and it's unexpected. So this just means, this first statement right here, means that their inflation goes up. The question's asking if there's unexpected inflation, if unexpected inflation increases. So if inflation increases. If your exam is easy, that'd be awesome. I would love for your exam to be easy. It could be easy. That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it's also possible that because a lot of your classes ended content early, one, there is less to pull from for your AP exams, which can make it easier to study because there's less that you have to study. And two, a lot of your classes have been in review mode for like a month and a half now. So you've been reviewing for like 4 weeks in some classes. And that probably helps, I would assume. So there's a couple of things that go in the favor of like your exam could feel easier this year because of that. Econ would be the one that I think wouldn't have that effect only because we haven't been in review mode for a month because they cut it off poorly for econ. They made it so that we would still have to teach a lot of the content. So I don't know if econ will be that easy, but classes where they cut it appropriately, it should feel probably easier, which is good because it still counts for college credit for most of your colleges. So for D, sorry, this is saying if inflation goes up. Just translated that first line. Would a borrower with a fixed interest rate loan be better or worse off? Ooh, remember this? This was fun. So who benefits from unexpected inflation? This was a thing that I had you guys try and figure out back when we first talked about inflation, because it's tricky, because you're like, inflation sucks, except for some people. So let's think about it. Inflation goes up. You take out a loan to buy a house. Cool. And it says that you're a borrower, so you've already got the loan. So you borrowed, and then inflation went up. So you're borrowing to buy a house. You borrowed $200,000 to buy a house. Cool. You buy the house, and then inflation goes up. Well, how much am I paying back? It's the fixed interest rate loan. I am paying back $200,000, but everything else is getting more expensive. My loan isn't getting more expensive because it's a fixed interest rate, So I'm actually paying back less in dollar value than I was paying back before. Because if everything else is more expensive, that house would have been more expensive. So the value that I'm gaining from doing that transaction before the inflation hit is going up. So a borrower with a fixed interest rate is better off if there's unexpected inflation, because that interest rate doesn't account for it. It's unexpected. They didn't know it was going to happen. So that means, okay, well, if they have a lot of inflation, then that interest rate isn't going to keep up with it. If it's like a 4% interest rate and there's 25% inflation, you're not paying really that much for that house. The house should have been 25% more expensive the next year. You're only paying 4% on top of your original price. That ain't bad. So it's better off because the debt is worth less real dollars, or the debt has less value now. The debt is less valuable, which makes it easier to pay back. It's one of the ways to logically think about it. Again, borrowers benefit from unexpected inflation. Lenders get screwed over by it because they make that interest rate expecting a certain amount of inflation, expecting to get paid back a certain amount. If there's more inflation than they think, they're actually going to get paid back less in value than they were hoping. So lenders hate it, borrowers love it. Now, this is where the question breaks. You said benefit without explaining why. That is okay. Reminder, in a question like this, there would be 2 points for this question. One for identifying, one for explaining. If you don't know how to explain it, if you've got no shot at explaining it, I probably wouldn't bother explaining it, because for the most part, what can only happen there is that you could screw yourself over. If your explanation is counterintuitive or like undoes your answer in some way, shape, or form, then you'd actually lose both points. So if you don't know how to explain this, just write better off and move on with your life. If you know how to explain that, saying that they're better off because the debt is less valuable, then awesome. That would be great. Now this question, I'm putting the dotted line here because there's really a break in this question. A, B, C, and D are from one FRQ. E, F, and G are from another FRQ that are pretty separate. They could just sort of combine two FRQs like this, because you can just sort of smash questions together in econ relatively easily. But they're really two separate questions. So you could have done all of A through D wrong, and then E through A, F, and G you could get right. They're completely separate. E, identify an open market operation the Central Bank of Galaland could use to implement to lower the inflation rate. Okay, so this is completely separate. It's saying, well, it's separate. It's still tied to the question to talk about inflation, but that could be in any question. So we're looking for an OMO that's meant to lower the inflation rate. Okay, well, OMOs are a monetary policy, right? So there's just two types of monetary policy. There's expansionary and contractionary. Which monetary policy type should you pursue when you want to lower inflation? Well, expansionary policy is meant to get you out of a recession. Contractionary is meant to get you out of inflationary periods. So contractionary is what you want to do when you have too much inflation. So we want to lower inflation. We need to do a contractionary policy. Contractionary, ding, ding, ding. That's what gets us out of the inflation. What is the contractionary OMO? If you forgot what OMOs are the buying and selling of government bonds by the central bank. So what should the central bank do? Should they buy or should they sell bonds? Well, the contractionary one is if the Federal Reserve or the central bank sells bonds. Because if they sell the bonds, who's buying them? That's me and you, or banks. Either way, it means me, you, banks have less cash on hand and can spend less money on actual things that count towards our economy. Again, bonds themselves do not count towards GDP, do not help us produce things. They're just a way of making money in the future. They're not helpful really in the short run from a me and you standpoint. So this is sort of the logic that went through my head. We needed to do an OMO, and we needed to decrease inflation, so I needed a contractionary one. So the OMO that's contractionary is the central bank selling bonds. Cool thing is, it just says to identify. You don't have to tell them what this does. You don't have to tell them why this works the way it does. You just have to write the central bank sells bonds. That's all you would have had to write there. The central bank should sell bonds, move on. That's it. Okay? For F, it says, I indicate the effect of the open market operation you identified in Part E on the following: money demand and nominal interest rate. Oh, that's interesting. Let me put the answer here. Oh my God. Sell bonds. That would be the move. Now, what would this do on the money demand and nominal interest rates? Okay, money demand, nominal interest rate, that is a money market graph problem. It doesn't, again, you don't have to draw the graphs on these AP exam problems this year, but they do help. So this is my money market graph, reminder. Supply of money, demand of money, quantity of money, nominal interest rate. The question's asking what happens to the money demand and nominal interest rates when the Federal Reserve sells bonds. Okay, well, what does the Federal Reserve selling bonds do to our money market graph? Well, if we think back to the money market graph, monetary policy, all that does is change the money supply, right? That is the Federal Reserve trying to influence how much money is in the economy. Because when the Fed sells bonds, that means me and banks give money to the Fed, taking that money sort of out of the economy. Because if the Fed has it, it's not actually like circulating in our economy. It's being sort of held by the government. So when the Fed sells bonds, that is a contractionary monetary policy, meaning that should decrease the money supply, which would do this on my graph. And that should be kind of weird because the question asks what happened to money demand. What's the answer? Well, what happened to money demand, guys? Look at my graph. Look at my drawing. What happened to money demand? What happened to demand for money? What happened? What happened? What happened? Nothing. Nothing happens to money demand. Nothing. So nothing actually happens to money demand in this problem. This is not a money demand shifter. Monetary policy changes the money supply. What changes the money demand is changes in your desire to hold cash. And the Federal Reserve selling bonds doesn't really change how much cash you should have in your wallet. Not really. Again, things that would change the money demand are things like changing the price level or changing income. If there's a change in income or a change in price level, then yeah, money demand could change. And if you wanted to go down the rabbit hole and be like, well, if they do the contractionary policy, that could cause the interest rates to go up, which could cause demand to go down, which could cause price level to go down, which could change money demand. I mean, yes, you could do that, but that would take quite a bit of work and explaining, and when I just drew this, that's all that actually happens. That open market operation doesn't change money demand. Price level would change it, but open market operation, monetary policy doesn't change the money demand. What happened to nominal interest rate? Something did happen, though. This is the tricky part. Nothing happens to money demand, but money supply does decrease, which causes interest rates to go up. For your explanation part here, having the drawing is helpful, because having the drawing can be part of your explanation. Otherwise, you could simply say, because there's a decrease in the money supply, banks will charge more for loans because they have less money to lend out, thereby increasing nominal interest rates because that's the price of a loan. So less money supply means less money in banks. Banks have less money. They charge more for a loan. That's the simple logic of it. Okay, pause here if you want those answers. Questions over everything so far. There is a part G left, but if there's anything over parts A through F, and again, if you didn't get to hear me answer parts A, B, C, and then D in full, feel free to go back to the video and then watch the early part of the video because I do explain those too. I just have to delete everything before I scroll down because it carries with me. Like that, which is gross. So I give you guys a little bit of time before I get to part G. And there's one more FRQ problem after this. Check my email again. Nothing. Cool. Okay, don't see questions. I'm going to delete this and scroll down. Okay, G, identify how the change in nominal interest rates identified in part F2, which again, I'll rewrite it, was an increase in nominal interest rates, will affect the following in Galaland. Good news is it says identify, not explain, although this one does say explain anyway, so whatever. Interest rates go down. What happens to the price of previously issued bonds? These are inversely related variables. That is a relationship we know in the course. If you forgot how this worked, the idea was, okay, interest rates go up, so any newer bonds will have a higher interest rate with them, which is good. Like, you want to buy bonds with a really high interest rate because then you get a lot of money extra. Like, if you buy a $1,000 bond with a 5% interest rate, you're going to end up getting, if it's a 10-year bond, or in a 1-year situation, you would get paid back $1,050. If it was a 10% interest rate, you would get paid back $110. Or sorry, $1,100. So you want a high interest rate with a bond. If you have higher interest rates, then all of the new bonds, this is an important thing, the new bonds are worth more, which means your previously issued bonds, the ones that have that lowered interest rate, because they were the old ones, they were issued with the old interest rate, are less valuable. Bonds interest rate is fixed, and it is the interest rate when they buy it. So if, again, initially interest rate was 5%, cool, then all the bonds are at 5%, there's an increase in interest rates, so all the new bonds are sold at like 7%, then your old 5% bonds are less valuable now. Because they could get a 7% bond instead, why the hell wouldn't they just do that? So that's an inverse relationship between interest rates and previously issued bonds. You gotta remember that one. An economic growth rate, this was the last thing we covered last week, which is what drives economic growth, and that is capital. Okay, how much capital an economy has will drive its economic growth. Well, what determines capital? Investment spending does, right? Because when businesses spend on themselves, they improve their capital. They buy more technology and tools and things that help them make stuff. So that's capital. Okay, well, investment spending is inversely related with interest rates, same as previously issued bonds, actually. So interest and investment are inversely related. So in the situation at a higher interest rate, there would be less investment spending, which would mean a decrease in overall capital, or in capital growth, or in capital stock. You could phrase that a lot of ways, which would reduce the economic growth rate. So for that last one, it is also a decrease. Previously issued bonds will become cheaper. Economic growth rate will go down because increased interest rate will lead to decreased investment spending. So there will be a decrease in capital. And if there's less capital, you can't have your economy grow as much because there's less ability to produce if you have less capital. So there's the logic for the last one. Now again, that was the last thing we covered last week. So if you're still not sure on how economic growth rate is figured out or how we work through that, that was the last video from last week. The last content session we had for the course is economic growth. So first semester kids, that is something that we sort of touched on throughout the course, but didn't really go in depth at any point. The video I did for last Thursday, which was the economic growth rate video, I go in full depth on economic growth. So if you wanted one that's a little more tied to that, a little more of a good idea on what LRAS represents, that video should help you. Questions over this FRQ? Yeah, this is a bit of a doozy. Yeah, it's also kind of friggin' long. Again, they just mushed together 2 FRQ problems, so it's gonna feel longer than it should. And these 4 are tied to what we would have called Unit 3 in my class. So that'll be part of what we review this week, is this stuff will come up. I think that's Thursday's FRQs I'm doing will be over this kind of material. So if you are unsure on how I figured out these first 4, then great. Thursday's stuff will be good for that. And then this is primarily over monetary policy, money market graph, and economic growth. Those things we're covering next week, beginning of the week, probably Tuesday. Simply Tuesday, I'll hit on that stuff. Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. Okay, next FRQ. Sample question number 2. This one looks a little bit shorter. Yeah, I think it is. I'm not going to pause for time on this one if you want to work through it, just because I don't want to. It's already 2:40, and if I do that, this could take another like 40 minutes. I don't want that to happen. So if you want to work through this problem, okay, nothing's cut off here. If you want to work through this problem, pause the video here and work through it, and then unpause the video and see if you got the answer right. The way the FRQ is formatted, would that be similar to the real exam? Yes, it would, Runus. This is roughly what I would imagine, and these are both examples of your longer FRQ. You're going to have one long FRQ where you have 25 minutes to solve. That's probably going to be parts A through F or parts A through G. And then you're going to have one FRQ that's shorter. That'll be probably parts like A through D, maybe A through E. And that'll be a 15-minute problem. So you have a short and a long FRQ. Landry, have you made a video about the multiplier effect? Yes. Yes, I have. I've done 2 technically. I've done one where it was just the MPS, MPC multiplier, one like the spending and tax multiplier, which is also in Unit 3, Landry, so I'll hit on that in Thursday's FRQ, I think. We'll touch on those. That'll come up in Thursday's FRQ. And then, additionally, I did the money multiplier effect when we did monetary policy, or that week of monetary policy. So if you just go to the content session videos, Landry, on my YouTube, there's like a playlist I put of my content sessions. You should see one where it's MPS, MPC multipliers, or money multiplier. Those are in there. Yeah, I got you, Landry, don't worry. Luckily, because of how long we've been in remote, I've effectively made at least one video for each thing, whether that be a content session or a review session over some topics that we covered before. So there's a video out there for basically every subject. And these are all like an hour-long videos, but that's comprehensive, covers literally everything about it, reteaches the whole thing. So if you want to just skim through that video and see how much of it you've got and remember and how to do, it's a good idea. And there's usually practice questions in every single one of these videos. Okay. So assume that the budget of Meekland the economy of Meekland's in long-run equilibrium, cool, with a balanced government budget. Okay. So that's my background information. Long-run equilibrium, that will absolutely matter. That has never not mattered when they tell us that. With a balanced government budget, with a balanced budget, which just means one big thing, and that is that at the moment, tax revenue equals government spending. So long equilibrium and a balanced budget, which means revenue, government revenue, this is tax revenue, is equivalent to government spending. Basically, the government doesn't spend more money than it brings in. So, A, consider the PPC for Meekland, production possibilities curve, which is, in case you forgot, this graph. Is current output on, below, or beyond the PPC? Well, what is on, below, and above the PPC? Below the PPC was a recession, or where there's unemployment. Outside the PPC is if you, well, it's technically impossible or unattainable given current resources, or it's that you're overproducing / overusing your resources. That on the line is full employment, and long-run equilibrium is at full employment. So A would be on the PPC. If you're at full employment, then you're at long-run equilibrium. So we on it. It's currently on the production possibilities curve. Okay, B. Assume that consumer confidence falls. Identify the short-run impact on each of the following in Meekland. Cool, it doesn't say explain. So this will either be increase or decrease or stay the same. One of those three things is what you'll write here. So we got all of it. Let's just go through all of it. Consumer confidence falls. The answer choices lead me to believe, or the parts of the question I have to answer, lead me to believe that this is asking about the aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph. Reminder that we are at long-run equilibrium, so I can draw this a specific way. So my graph should initially look like this because we're at long-run equilibrium. Consumer confidence falls. People are less confident in the economy, which means what will happen? Well, what happens if people aren't confident in the economy or how the economy is doing? Think right now. What do people do when the economy is not doing well? They get freaked out, right? And they start to save. because they're worried about losing their jobs, about not being able to afford things long term, so they start to save their money. They tend to cut back on frivolous spending. They tend to do less stupid stuff and scale back their spending. So, spending less. Okay, people are spending less. What should happen on my graph? Well, AD should decrease. People are spending less, and there's less demand for everything in our economy. Should mean a couple of things. So my graph would look like that. Hard to draw. And again, you can draw these. They're just not required on your AP exam. It's not a bad idea to sketch it, though. That's why I would do your AP exam on scratch paper, or at least have scratch paper when you're doing your AP exam, so you can sketch stuff like that. What's happening to each of these things? Well, okay, that's not too complicated. Aggregate demand went down, and price level went down, and output, which is measured by GDP, went down. Because if you look at my graph, my X and Y value of my new equilibrium point are lower, so both those decrease. What will happen to employment, not unemployment? This is tricky. People are spending less, businesses would probably be making less money, which means they'd be hiring less people, so employment would go down. Unemployment would go up, but it said employment. That is tricky on purpose. The answer for all of them is decrease, which you would probably hate if you had to write on the AP exam, but that's the correct answer. And then on a correctly labeled graph of the short and long run Phillips curve, frickin' A, it got you already. On the correctly labeled graph of our short and long run Phillips curve, would the fall in consumer confidence cause movement along the SRPC to the right, to the left, a rightward shift of the LRPC, or a leftward shift of the LRPC? And explain. It's asking, okay, what would happen on my LRPC? It's giving us a lot of answers. It's just asking what would happen on my LRPC. So aggregate demand goes down. Here's my Phillips curve would look like initially. Oh wait, you can't see it. There it is. Wait, oh, there it is. Phillips curve looks like this initially. That blue dot represents full employment, so we're all doing great so far. AD went down, price level went down, and GDP went down. Well, if price level goes down, then inflation rate has to fall, because prices are going down, so inflation's not happening as much. And if GDP is going down, then unemployment rate is going up. So I need both of these things to be happening. I need lower inflation and higher unemployment. How do I show that on my Phillips curve? Well, I move down along the Phillips curve, and I would go down along to the right. Because at point A, I have a certain amount of inflation and unemployment. At point B, I would have less inflation, right? Because at point B, I have a lower y coordinate, y value, and higher unemployment rate because it's further to the right. So what I did on my Phillips curve is I moved to the right along my Phillips curve. So along the SRPC down / to the right is the answer. Reminder that when you change aggregate demand, you move along your Phillips curve. When you change aggregate supply, you shift your Phillips curve. That is the big difference there. The explanation would simply be this bit. This thing on the right here, this is really how I explain it. Say because price level falls, inflation rate should fall because prices are going down, so there's less inflation. And because GDP goes down, businesses are making less money, won't be able to afford as many workers, and unemployment will rise, which would mean I would move down along my Phillips curve because moving those coordinates would yield me a lower inflation rate and a higher rate of unemployment. The drawings do help. They do not supplement your explanation. They do not, they can't like bail you out. They do want a verbal explanation, but they can guarantee you get the right answer. If the government and central bank do not pursue any discretionary policy change, how does the fall in consumer confidence affect government transfer payments? And Meekland explained. Who Nelly? Okay, let's talk about this then. This is interesting. They don't ask about transfer payments very much. And a lot of you guys probably don't know what transfer payments are or forgot. We did cover it. It's just covered in very short term because it's not that frequently asked about. But here's an FRQ that they are asking about it. So let's talk about it. Government transfer payments is when the government redistributes money to people from the economy. This is most commonly in the form of things like welfare and unemployment. It's a portion of government spending that is not on stuff that counts for GDP. Okay, it's money, aid sent by the government to help certain groups. So, saying the government and central bank do not pursue any discretionary policy change, it's using the term discretionary as an important thing because government transfer payments fall under the umbrella of non-discretionary fiscal policy. Oh boy, we touched on that for like 5 minutes in one of the videos, so if you forgot it, it's okay. What we're talking about here is something called an automatic stabilizer, because when you have this increase in unemployment rate, what you're going to have is more unemployed people, right? Well, what do those unemployment people do? What do they try to do from the government standpoint? Well, they tend to apply for like unemployment benefits and welfare, food stamps and stuff like that. When you lose your job and you can't just find a job, you ask the government for help, which is, why we have a welfare system, is to help out people who are on like not in a good situation, a lot of times not because of any of their fault. So what will happen here is that this fall in consumer confidence will increase government transfer payments because of the increased number of people qualifying or attempting to get, you could phrase this a lot of different ways. The best way to phrase it is qualifying. Increased number of people qualifying for unemployment or welfare. For welfare. And because of that, the government is actually spending more money. This is a component of government spending, but just not one that's tied to GDP. So we tend not to include it when we talk about government spending, but it is like a part of the balanced budget thing. The budget balance is revenue equals government spending. I mean, this G does include transfer payments. Oh, you can't see it. My head's in the way. Revenue equals government spending. That is our balanced budget. This does tie into G. This is a part of G here. Identify the effect of the change in government transfer payments on the demand for loanable funds and the real interest rate in England. Oh, freaking hell. It's a loanable funds market thing. It is. If you're wondering where does that transfer payment thing come from, it comes from the automatic stabilizers, which if you're looking for a video over that, the fiscal policy video. The fiscal policy video covers automatic stabilizers. It's just a thing that I only spent about 5 minutes on because it's just like the only FRQ I've ever seen where they actually ask about it. So, let me look at what I'm doing here. Loanable funds market. It's raining outside. Okay, so the question is asking simply, okay, so there is an increase in government transfer payments. There's an increase in government transfer payments. What will happen to the demand for loanable funds and the real interest rate? Well, the government's going to be spending more money, right? This is the logic of it. Okay, well, they were balanced before. They were in a balanced budget before, but they just increased G. So now it's not R equals G, it's R is less than G. What does this statement mean? What happens if your revenue is less than your government spending? For government spending more money than it's bringing in, what is happening? Is the government's in a deficit? Oh, friggin' hell, is this crowding out? It's crowding out. This is a crowding out problem. Welcome to crowding out. They threw crowding out here at the end just to friggin' mess with you. So this is crowding out. It doesn't say to explain anything, thank friggin' God. It just asks what happens to government spending and real interest rate. Jeebs, I don't know who you are, so probably not, and I won't shave my beard. If anything weird was going to happen to my hair, it's that I might dye it a weird color because we're still in quarantine, and it's getting really boring. But the beard stays. No matter what, the beard stays. So what happens to loanable funds demand? Well, demand goes up because the government is going to need to borrow money. If the government's going to be doing these transfer payments but doesn't have the money to pay for them, they have to get that money from somewhere. And if you need money from somewhere and you don't have it, what do you typically do? You borrow. So what's happening on the loanable funds market graph is this. There's an increased demand for loanable funds as the government needs to increase its borrowing to help finance and pay for these increased transfer payments. In doing so, in demanding more loans, it is going to drive up real interest rate because if banks start to have more demand for loans, even if it's from the government, it's going to mean they're going to start charging more for a loan. So what happens to demand for loanable funds and real interest rate? Increase. Again, Jeebs, I don't know who you are, but the answer is no. I would not cheat on the test. It's a bad idea. mean, if you want your college to reject you, that'd be funny. Just take a prank on your family. If you're like, oh, I cheated on my AP exam, and then my college found out, and then they rejected my acceptance, and I'm living with you guys the next 4 years. So no, I would not do that. Okay, F. In the absence of any changes in fiscal and monetary policies in the long run, will the short-run aggregate supply curve shift to the left, right, or remain unchanged as a result of the fall in consumer confidence? Okay, F's a weird detour. So F's going back to my aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph. So going back to that graph, which again, the consumer confidence thing was a decrease in aggregate demand, if you forgot. So this is what my graph looked like. Question's asking, if the government doesn't do anything at all, what should happen on this graph? Reminder of what was referred to as the long-run self-adjustment is the idea, which is, hey, in the long run, if the government doesn't do anything, a part of our economy is going to try and self-correct and sort of fix the economy. And that is typically businesses, because businesses have the most direct incentive. They have a significant amount of power because they can control prices and wages in the long run, because those are flexible. Given enough time, those things can change. Businesses dictate that. And they also have the incentive, because if they don't fix it, then they're going to start to lose a lot of money. So, what should happen here? Businesses will fix the problem. How could they fix this problem? Well, the problem is we are in a recession. The bad news is unemployment's going up. The good news is price level is going down. Things are getting cheaper. Well, if I'm a business and everything is getting cheaper, there's really two things that I can think are going to help me. One, my resources are going to get cheaper because the price level is going down, so it's going to start to cost less to produce things. And two, I can start paying my workers less now. Because if everything's cheaper, then they can't really complain if I lower their wages, because they'll still be making effectively the same amount of money in real spending money. They just get paid less of a numerical value. Either way, because the price level is lower, firms, businesses, etc., whatever, I'm just going to say firms, will decrease wages. And if they decrease wages, they'll have more money to hire more workers. Hire workers, and then produce more. Jeeves, I still don't know who you are. So until I know who you are, heck no. And also probably not anyway. So because price level is going to go down, we're going to see an increase in SRAS because businesses are going to lower wages, hire more workers, and ramp up their production. Remember that the goal is always to get back to long-run equilibrium. We always want to get back to a spot where our economy is at long-run equilibrium. The only way that can happen with SRAS here is that it increases SRAS, which will get us back to equilibrium. And that's again because businesses will cut wages and hire more workers. So it should shift to the right. Bang. Okay, questions, comments, and concerns over that FRQ. That one touches on a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, that's a fairly scattershot FRQ in terms of PPC is mentioned, aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph is mentioned, Phillips curve is mentioned, and loanable funds market graph is mentioned. It also hits on automatic stabilizers and the long-run self-adjustment, two things that are fairly complicated. So there's a lot of bits there. That is a fairly hard FRQ. So if you were getting confused there, if you were thrown off by a lot of that stuff, that's fine. If you were good with A and B, good. I think A and B are the parts where I need you to understand how A and B work. If you know those two, great. We can figure out the Phillips curve thing if you graph it and keep track of things like price level and employment as it relates to the Phillips curve. That can make sense. D, if you don't understand D, it ain't the end of the world. It ain't the end of the world if you don't understand D, because transfer payments is tricky. But the idea is, okay, if there's more unemployment, then people would... Oh yeah, sir, I'll explain in D and E again. Bernice, that's totally fine. I don't know who Jeeves is. I'm trying to think of who Jeeves would be. It's not important. So for D, if the government doesn't do anything, what they're asking is, okay, if the government's not choosing to do anything, what could happen to transfer payments because of that fall in consumer confidence? So transfer payments are things like welfare, unemployment. It's money that the government sort of gives to people in the form of kind of a handout, to help them out in times of crisis. Well, that fall in consumer confidence we mentioned decreases employment, right? Which means there's more unemployment in your economy. Well, if there's more unemployment in your economy, then more people are going to start applying for those unemployment benefits and welfare and stuff, and they'll qualify for it, so they would get that money. So there would be an increase in transfer payments, because those are automatic. Once you qualify for them, you do start receiving them. If you qualify for unemployment and apply for it, you do receive it. The government doesn't have to sign a new bill saying, hey, we're going to have unemployment benefits. No, that's like built in. That's like a permanent thing. Oh boy, now we're getting a bunch of people that I don't even know. Whatever, it's fine. Would prefer you guys log in with your student account so I can see your names. Makes it easier for me. Otherwise, just tell me who you are. Oh god, I'm starting removing people from the chat. Oh, I can't do it from here. Whatever. I'll explain D&E before I deal with the chat stuff. It's the first time chat's gotten weird though in a while. So there's this. So ruining stuff that helps explain D though. People will qualify for more of that. Okay, Jeeps is in our chat, I think. E, identify the effect that you identified on the ban for loanable funds market. Ruinous, what was happening here was, okay, there's an increase in transfer payments, and the government had a balanced budget prior to this. So the government has ramped up its spending, but hasn't increased tax revenue at all. The government isn't making more money, but is spending more money. Yeah, it's really just a land party. This is turning into Discord. It seems like Jeeves might be Ethan. Or it's Luke. I saw, Jeeves, we all saw that you typed the wrong version of your first. We all saw it. There's no point in correcting it. So the idea for E is that because the government has ramped up its spending, even though it's in a deficit, they're going to have to borrow in order to finance its spending. Again, this is the basic idea of crowding out. When the government spends money it doesn't have, it has to borrow it. So it means there's an increase in demand for loanable funds, which will drive up the real interest rate. Because the government is borrowing more, the price of borrowing will go up. And again, real interest rate is the expense or price of a loan. That should work. It is Ethan. How did I know? Because of how you... 1, you asked for my Discord. 2, you said your mom. 3, the most obvious thing was that you said Landry shut up. Which means you're one of Landry's friends. Which Landry doesn't have that many friends. So it was going to be like Ethan or Luke or something. Sick burn on Landry. I figured it was Parks. Don't know who Virus and Evade are. Okay, cool, Runus, thank God. Because frankly, the E thing, the crowding out thing, I know is hard to understand. Crowding out's a thing that students struggle with every year. The basic idea is if there's a situation where the government is going to ramp up spending in some capacity and isn't bringing in any more money than before, so if they didn't change taxes at all but they increase spending, they're going to have to borrow more, which means demand for loans is going to go up because there's more borrowing happening, and if they want to borrow more, the price of loans goes up too. So you got to think of the government in this situation as a borrower because they can borrow just like anybody else can. You found me randomly on YouTube? That's super sad that you're able to find me that randomly. Either that means I'm super popular or you have like the saddest like watch history. I do in fact have friends. Landry, you're in band. They don't really count. If they're in percussion, they definitely don't count. They just fear you. I'm just roasting Landry for no reason. Landry's like one of my favorite students. I'm still just gonna roast him anyway. Andrew and Ethan are like guys as students. I'm just making fun of you because I can and I don't get to do it in person anymore. I think that covers it. Questions on these two ones. Ethan, you don't even need to watch this because you're not taking the AP exam. It's good to see you though. So yeah, this is how you would solve this FRQ. The handwriting, obviously, don't do it like this terribly, and also write out your answers and stuff. But like those are the answers to that FRQ and the previous one. And again, if you want to work through these, you can pause it and work through them. If you need to see those answers again, just go back to the video and watch it again to see what you needed to do. Let me go to default with the bigger cam. But yeah, that should just about cover it for today. Again, tomorrow I'm going to hit on comparative advantage, absolute advantage, terms of trade, production possibilities curves. I'm going to do some FRQs that focus on those things. They'll touch on other ones because all these FRQs are tied to a bunch of stuff in the course, but they're questions that are focused on those two subjects. On Thursday, I'm going to be doing FRQs that focus on GDP, CPI, unemployment, and maybe multiplier. Those kinds of things are what I'm going to touch on there. And then on Friday, I'm going to be going over our practices. Again, we have a Super Saturday this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then next Thursday, the day of our AP exam, again, that's next Thursday at 3 is our AP exam. I'll be going on my live stream probably at like 10 o'clock in the morning, just going from 10 until your AP exam, answering questions, doing whatever you guys need me to do. Of like, hey, could you review multiplier effect? I could do that then, anything like that. Who is in the back on my couch? There's a pillow. Nobody's back there right now. Archer. Archer. Gamer boy. David is my first name. It's weird that Landry's calling me that now, but I can't stop him because he's not in person. Garrick is what I go by though, so Zion gets extra points for that. There's Archer. There's the good boy. We're basically graduates now. I mean, yeah, but I don't go by my first name, Landry. So that means we're not even friends. Oh God, you're shedding more. Why? Why do you do this? You're not basically graduates now. You got 2 weeks to blow it. Oh my God, how? We just run you over with a brush, buddy. Yeah, Luke and Mac were supposed to drop off. Teacher appreciation present. And I wore the jorts. Yeah, I'm wearing jorts. Look at this. You're welcome, everybody. Your boy's wearing jorts. Also, look at my feet. Bang. I'm a simp to my dog. Okay. I know what simp means, by the way. Good boy. Oh my God, there's so much hair. I'm allowed to love my dog. Don't know who John Lambert is. All right, so I don't see any more questions for over the content, so because of that, I'm going to start hopping off here. Thanks, guys, for everything. Everyone is weird, and the weird people that are in the chat are throwing me off a little bit, but outside of that, we're okay. Any questions you might have over the course, feel free to ask them as always. Students, email me. You know my email and everything if you need anything. I got